Well, welcome to AltSpaceVR.
Very cool. I appreciate it. This is gonna be really interesting. The first interview in VR about
Yeah,
VR. Gonna
sweet,
turn into a
very
meme,
sweet.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. So meta.
All right. I'm glad I didn't go live on Twitch with this. Jeez, look like an idiot. All right. Formal
Yeah,
introductions.
formal intro. Hello, what's going on? How's it going? Bruce Wooden, also known in the VR community as Cymatic Bruce, is kind of back in the day when all this VR stuff was beginning, just getting the resurgence, I guess. I happened to be in the right place at the right time on the forum where all this stuff was happening. End up being on the Oculus Kickstarter, like pledging, first hour it was open,
Wow.
and just being really involved in the VR community from that point, and it went from making a few dev videos, co-founding Silicon Valley Virtual Reality, a meetup, and now a conference as well, which has been going strong for a few years, and then
Great.
also helping to co-found, AltSpace VR. So it's been kind of just a wild journey of craziness with this VR industry as it's kind of grown. But yeah, that's kind of where the concise story of kind of where where I've come into this VR picture here. And I started lurking that forum end of 2011, beginning of 2012, something like that.
Got
So
it.
that's
Yeah.
kind of when I, started when all that stuff was going on, and yeah, it's like 2012 was Oculus Kickstarter, and that's when things were going on. I think it was 2013 when we started SVVR, had our first meetup. It's also when I got to know the AltSpace VR, my co-founders there, and by 2014 I totally changed careers and was full-time VR.
There you
So
go.
yeah, it's been about the past about 5 years of my life, I guess, kind of on a
Okay.
gradually gradually been taking over my life, this VR stuff. So
It's funny you say gradually, and that's what I said. This is, the short lifespan of all this is just amazing, right? How fast
oh
it's
yeah,
going.
oh, it's been brilliant. I mean, when this stuff all started, we're like, oh, this is going to be a fun game peripheral to tinker with and have a little indie homebrew community around. I mean, that's as far as anyone thought it was going to go for at least 5 years, right? It's going to be this
Yeah.
little thing this dude made, and it's like, oh, cool, we'll have some games made for it, and people kind of, have this little small community of people building stuff, and it just blew up into this, it's a huge thing. I mean, this 2016, there was almost $2 billion worth of VR hardware and software sold, and everything wasn't even out last year. I mean, it wasn't like stuff was out at the beginning of the year. I mean, like Gear VR didn't actually officially launch until February of last year,
Yeah.
and everything like
Right.
launched after that. And that it's still like
Yeah.
it's really remarkable how quickly everything is kind of has moved for our industry here.
Yeah. And even the change with cardboard was kind of a plaything, and then all of a sudden you get these really nice and shiny objects to play with in your hands, and um, Sony jumping in,
Mhm.
with the PlayStation VR idea.
Yeah. It just legitimizes everything. Once you get these really big players, you get Sony making quality product. You have Google going pretty much all in and advancing from cardboard. You have these just major folks in here. Facebook, of course. So you have all these kind of really visionary companies that are recognizing the potential of what this medium means. So it's definitely encouraging and exciting all at once. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
hmm
Well, I'd say, I played, I did more than play in Second Life, but, I was hanging out, doing stuff, working in education of all things, in Second Life. And that's, I'll be embarrassing and say that's 10 years ago, more.
yeah,
But
it's
but it just sort of sat there, and didn't have a lot of motion, it became. I think it just sort of stayed in place. What do you think? Why do you think there's been like a big shift into like this space is, it's already starting to fill up. I know that.
Yeah, I think, part of it is, it's the a combination of complexity, the barrier to entry, people really understanding the value. And Second Life, I mean, it's still kind of, there's still people that are in it and all about it to this day, actually.
Yep. Yep.
And those people, they're in there, they're, able to grasp it, but it didn't get to a point where, just any kind of person down the street could totally get it and grasp it and get in and totally understand what's going on. And I think that's what VR needs, but it's also moving that direction as well. I think the major factor that's happening in virtual reality right now is these developments that are happening on the mobile side, where you have the high-end PC stuff with Oculus and Vive. You have your very powerful PC. You have this setup that you're dedicating maybe a room or at least a portion of the room or your desk to.
Right.
It's very much a PC gamer's thing. But you also have these things where, and it's not quite there yet, but you still, you have a cell phone that you can plug into a thing, and there you go. And it's getting more user-friendly all the time. And it's a combination of that stuff getting more user-friendly and also the capabilities increasing, where, pretty soon we're going to see a mobile unit that's going to have, the capabilities of a Vive almost, are very close to it, like, with inside-out tracking. It's making some advances with, track controllers and things like that. You're going to have something that's going to be, not exactly, it's definitely going to be limitations, but you're going to have something that's going to have some of the core functionality of what we have on PC now in a mobile unit. Maybe that's a year or 2 years off. That becomes very accessible because everyone has a cell phone in their pocket. Or, you get to the point, it's just based on cell phone technology. When you get to that point where you can have a self-contained unit, you go to Best Buy, you pay $200 and you get everything in the same box and you have everything you need. I think we're rapidly kind of getting to that point where it becomes this kind of really streamlined, awesome thing to really get into from a hardware and kind of user experience side. And then then at that point it's only really waiting on the content to be compelling. And you have a kind of a nice mix, nice formula there for growth. But
here's a question that's kind of just popped into my head, frankly, because I hadn't thought of it before. But when you talk about the self-contained unit and smart TVs, okay, the big, the beautiful, and they're really this combination of the OTT box, is kind of built into the set. But as I was thinking about, how you've been really smart, that this space is available on a lot of different platforms and is pretty much the same, even I haven't really gotten to play in the web VR version of it, but I've been, been in the other sides of it and been with the Gear side and the Vive and the Oculus. So what about that? And part of why I'm asking is that one of the great benefits in this environment, what really makes it feel like you are, in a virtual space, is that you're working or you're moving around. You're having a three-dimensional environment. But in the web VR, you're in a basically flat space, and essentially, I would think that with the smart TVs, you got that same issue.
Yeah, I think it's definitely interesting to bring that up. So yeah, we're definitely on multiple platforms, on Vive, on the Rift, on the Gear VR, the Daydream from Google, and also in 2D mode. So if you have just a regular like Android device or laptop or something and no VR headset, you can still kind of in 2D mode experience AltSpace, right? And the stuff we're doing in web VR, we don't actually have the entire application running through a browser, but we have apps that are essentially pulled from the web. But that's also kind of an important part of what we're doing in the future I can talk about as well. But I think, yeah, the key factor is, I think, that what really hooks you about being in social VR is those things that it can do that previous media can't, like a video chat or a text chat can't do. For example, like in here, because we're in an immersive world in VR and 3D, you have a sense of how close I am to you, and that changes the nature of our conversation, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, or if we were in a circle and there was two other people here, having a conversation with 4 or 5 people in the video chat becomes really awkward. But in VR, you have all these verbal cues. You're looking at someone, and maybe you all look at him, and this person starts speaking over here. So you have these things where, because it's based on having a three-dimensional space and that immersion, you have some capabilities that aren't even possible with previous medium. Like, you can have other people in the room. We can have a conversation here. They could be across the room having a conversation, and we don't, we just like in a real room, right? So that kind of stuff is just a video chat, a text chat. You can't really do that. So it's kind of this rich kind of communication that's closer to a face-to-face chat. So I think that becomes important, and some of that can come across in 2D mode, right? Like if someone's on a smart TV or someone's on their tablet or phone in 2D mode without a VR headset, and they're moving around the 3D environment, they can get a sense of that. It's not, totally clear right off the bat, but when you're seeing other people in there with VR headsets, like moving their heads around and gesturing with their, you start to, it becomes almost the ultimate advertising tool for VR, because you get firsthand to see, like, oh man, these people are gesturing and talking all natural, and I want to do that. What do I need to get this VR thing, right? So I think it becomes this, we really are trying to focus on that accessibility, like lowering the barrier, getting people in, having them get a taste of what it means to kind of have this rich communication in a social environment like this. Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how it goes and what type of effect it'll have as we have more and more devices out there that people can get a taste of what VR is about.
Right. So that touches one thing when you talk about the I don't want to say the kinesthetic, because we don't have haptic stuff going on in here directly, but we do have a stronger sense of presence, obviously, because we do have the spatial sense of where we are with the 3D, and also the spatial audio, which, the very first time I came in, and particularly I think I was going there was comedy evening, and there was stuff going on, and as I moved around the entire space, I really did have a strong sense of moving through a real space because of the spatial audio effect on top of the visual. But the thing I wanted to get to next was this idea of, so we have all of these cues, that make us feel like we're in a real space, and I think that's another thing that's a major attraction, as you say, and that's why I brought up the flat world. Can it ever be as powerful? But one thing to think about too is that we do have our hands, our heads, some of our mouth movement and eye movement. But how much there are I think 5, 6 avatars right now, and there's X amount of what you can do with it. So for me, for instance, my little sort of gray old goatee isn't showing, and I don't have my glasses on, and I'm fantastically well built considering what I look like, in real life.
There you go.
So, what about the development more of the avatar, and how close you might think about bringing it in as I'll say a competitive space, for instance, is using AI and facial recognition to create avatars that purportedly start from what you really look like, and then you have some things. How important do you think that is?
I think it's really important to a point. I think everyone, this is one of those things when you have this new industry, that's something that everyone says they want, right? They want an avatar that looked exactly like me to the grainiest detail. But when you actually see that in VR, you're like, oh. If it's not perfect, you run to the uncanny valley.
Oh, well,
so,
that's like when actors
yeah.
started to see themselves in HD.
Yeah,
They
and they're like,
completely freaked out and think
whoa.
Will Smith, the first movie that Will Smith was going to be filmed in HD, he insisted on a full. This is the story. He insisted on a full screen test in a theater to see what he would look like on screen in HD.
Yeah, yeah, it's important, man. That digital self-image, as it were, is pretty important stuff. So avatars are definitely important to us. I think there's this balance between essentially two very important things. One is performance. When you're in a room with 30 other avatars, everything has to hum smoothly, run well, especially if you're on a mobile, if you're on a phone. You want to make sure that phone's not going to burn out. So part of that is you have to have it to a certain level of simplicity, because if 30 or 40 avatars are in the same spot, then hey, that you're going to need to make sure that runs well. The other part of it is really getting to the point where it's unique enough, where you have your sense of self-expression, I think is really important. So I think the really good test is if I can go into a room with 20 avatars and pick you out as my friend across the room, then we've done a good job, right? So I think that's kind of maybe the benchmark. Like if we can, get a room of 20 or 30 avatars and you can pick out your friends or pick out individuals, then, that's good. So that might mean, I think it definitely means something a little more robust than we have now for sure. It's something that we're working hard on. But it might not mean something that's absolutely photorealistic. I think we're still kind of exploring what that means and to make sure that you can still have an emotional connection and feel good about the conversation that you're having with someone when you're looking them virtually in the eye, looking them right in their face, and you don't feel uncomfortable, right? So I think those are kind of the balance that we're looking at, that we focused on to kind of make that happen and to make sure that you feel comfortable with however you're representing yourself here in AltSpace, and also have a degree of uniqueness that's going to be meaningful as you explore. Yeah. Right. So.
I mean, you've obviously gotten very used to working with your hands, with the tools that you use to indicate your hands, and there's a certain amount of motion that will happen with the fingers and all. So I think there is, just as we learn any language in a particular place and a culture, we start to get used to talking that way or communicating that way, and that also helps us with building the community. It's the same old idea that comes back to the person's with you when they start to imitate your movements or your emotions. You know that they're emotionally connecting to you because their reflection is the idea. So I wanted to talk a little bit too about just the aspects of when you're dealing with creating a social community. I think this is something I had sent on to you as a question, because it can be touchy, because we know that in some social communities, which have nothing to do with whether they're virtual or not, you have, for instance, within the gaming community, there's the norms that you're in there to kill and be killed, right? And that's cool. That's what that's about. And then, right. And is it real or not real? Yes, it's certainly real, because you're playing in real time with other human beings. They're at the other end, and sometimes the cameras are on each other too, to add even more to what the avatar is doing. Then you get to a large-scale social community, which is not about that, and you have trolling and other kinds of things. So how do you deal when you start to get to that kind of thing about creating the social norms that make societies helpful and useful, and the people feel good about themselves, and they want to keep coming back in order to feel better and to have a good time at the same time, or to learn, depending on what's the point of being in the particular community. So
that's a great question. I think
it's a complicated question, and that we spent an hour on that alone, but just sort of.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think we went through phases at AltSpace. I think we were before we kind of went open beta. Everyone that was in AltSpace had a dev kit. There were down for this VR thing that was happening, we had a lot of good behavior overall, almost zero trolling when we first started before we went open beta, and we're like, whoa, maybe this kind of social cues are carrying over from real life. And as soon as we went open beta, which kind of was along with, and shortly thereafter, Gear VRs start getting more and more populous out there, things changed really quickly. As the barrier of entry lowered, we're like, whoa, this is the kind of the personality, the community, the type of people that are coming in. We're getting a kind of a different flavor. So we had to institute some tools to make sure those things, those kind of negative experiences were kind of avoided as much as we can. And as we grew, it's been kind of this ongoing, not quite struggle is the right word, more of this kind of learning, this kind of adventure of learning, where it's, partially it's like, on one side, we're really trying to establish, what it is to be in AltSpace, to feel welcome in AltSpace. We have our road team here that's helping people out to kind of give them a flavor and a feel for what's here. We have a lot of events, like we have like a mingle and chill. We have a community corner, so we try to kind of instill a lot of like, hey, this is what's going on, this is what you can do, this is how you can contribute. So part of it is that, and we, of course, our community standards and whatnot. But then there's also the way we've structured our tools, from being able to mute people, to be able to block people, to having a space bubble. One of the icons in the UI there is a space bubble that you can turn on and off. So people, if they get in your personal space, they'll disappear. So that's like one of the things that we've done. We used to just have just kind of open rooms. There'd just be persistent spaces like, hey, this is a room you go to play air hockey in. It's always open. Anyone can pass through. And because there were no moderator in those spaces, more often than not, people wouldn't stay there because it'd be it'd be 5 people having a good time, and the 6th person comes along, they're a jerk, and everyone just disperses, right? Everyone was just hanging around in the spot where the moderator was. And we're like, oh, well, we need to do something about that. So we structured these activities in a way that whoever starts an activity, it's an instance of a space, and whoever starts it is the moderator. And you can also set it so you can friend people and set your activity to friends only. So we've kind of instituted these tools to make sure that, in general, it's been like to prevent just public unmoderated spaces, to give people tools to get to their comfort level, and so they can kind of find their corner of enjoyment in AltSpace without this kind of constant threat of being spoiled. Because much like a house party in real life, it just takes one a-hole to come in and really destroy the mood. Right? It's the same in social VR. You can have 20, 30 people having a great time, tremendous, and then one person, it's like I teleported here on accident. You have one person come in, and that 31st person, and it just ruins it for everybody. And you're like, geez, if only we had someone to kick that guy or mute that guy, or a bouncer to get that guy out of here. And it's kind of this, it's a constant, back and forth, constant learning that we're like getting feedback from our users, trying to find out the best way to get that balance between, making sure that we have some tools in place, but also don't be too stifling as well, to make sure that people are able to explore and grow and get to know each other, and not just immediately hem themselves off in clicks and never get to know anybody again. So it's definitely a balance that we're trying to maintain and learn about.
So are you affected also by just real world constraints of where this is available? I mean, are there countries that would just not be able to get in at all simply because of their own restrictions? So a country can decide to turn off Twitter or turn off Facebook, have you come across any of that kind of stuff yet?
So far, not yet. I think we're just so new. That's not something we've had to deal with at any meaningful scale. Right now, we have users over something like over 150 countries at this point, so there's people from all over. But yeah, I think it's at some point. I mean, you have Facebook that's making this essentially the Oculus product, and Facebook is I guess not allowed in China right now. You have Google, and so I mean, it's kind of a lot of that stuff will probably just kind of follow off of the people that are making the hardware, right? And where they have their issues in whatever countries they're in is going to extend to whatever their app stores or devices entail. So that's probably the extent of it that we'll see for a while, I expect. So far we've been pretty good in trying to welcome people. I think the first problem there is language barrier. We have people coming from all over, and it's like, sure. This is a product in English. We haven't done any localization anywhere else yet, so that's probably we'll have to get into that before we worry about getting banned anywhere. But yeah.
Got it. Sure. I'm gonna take my goggles down a second and pull out the piece of paper.
Oh, right.
That's something that would be helpful if I could bring a little clipboard in here. Let's see.
Yeah, as part of our menu, we have a web browser.
Sorry?
Oh, as part of our menu, we actually have a web browser, so you can bring up, like, if you had them in a Google Doc or something, you could kind of pop up the notes in front of you in the menu. Yeah, that's actually in some presentations. That's how people do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that sort of gives it all away if I put my whole list of questions up instead of a little cue card that I would hold here in my hand like a good Tonight Show host or something.
Oh yeah. We'll get there. I think that'll be really cool. We'll be able to put it to your head, Johnny Carson.
Cool. Style. I mean, I'm ready to do a Tonight Show kind of deal, especially if I can make an avatar that looks a little more appealing to the masses.
Oh yeah, there we go.
I've been on camera plenty, so I'm not worried about that really.
No problem.
Two things. I mean, you got to grow, and I know you got big growth plans, and at the same time, you're taking the adventurous route of just seeing how the community helps build the thing. Where do you think you're going to be in, let's say, 2 years? That's probably fair, right?
Yeah.
To ask.
For sure.
As a maybe.
Yeah, as a maybe. Hey, it's no one can predict the future, but I think we're in a pretty good place. I think VR as an industry has been the slow burn. That's something that we've expected. I think the other thing that we've also done is really gone hard on mobile. I think that's really over the next 2 years. I think that's where VR, as far as a product like ours, I think that's where a really good kind of mix starts to happen. Where once you have either cell phones, Android cell phones, or a product that are standalone based on cell phone tech that are really accessible, relatively cheap, have some pretty good capabilities. We're feeling really good about when that comes about, and we'll really be in a position as far as the infrastructure we're building, the features that we're building, to really do well there. And I think we're already seeing ourselves kind of doing well. Like most of our users are on the mobile side. We have a whole bunch of them, and the average times that they're in are also very compelling. Pretty much, people are, on average, they're in here. Anywhere from 15 to maybe 30 minutes on their mobile device, right? And that's like to the point of that thing, kind of running out of battery or burning out or whatever it's going to do with the current level of tech. So we've got some compelling stuff on the mobile side, as well as people on the high end side are staying in for even longer than that, and I think that's something that's really exciting for us, because that's saying, hey, we've got some compelling content, we're moving in the right direction, and when we have a person that's able to essentially, when they're doing VR, it's not like multitasking, like watching a YouTube video and doing a thing over here, I mean, you are locked in. You are doing VR. Yes. And, we have people in here for, 45 minutes to an hour just doing VR for that time, right? And that's a powerful thing. So I think that's the kind of thing that we're really excited about. That that as that continues, as we continue to find really compelling things, really fun things for people to do, that they're having a good time in here, and as the technology just the hardware is just continuing this march of getting better. So that becomes kind of that, the turning point, and that at that point we're just kind of, trying to learn as much as possible, iterate as much as possible, and kind of prepare for success. I think is really kind of the focus there. So I'm thinking that we'll be in pretty good shape by 2 years time.
Cool.
But yeah.
So the last question is without worrying about 2 years time or whatever, is what's on your your big dream wish list for what makes you keep coming to work on this project?
Oh man, that's
That might be two questions.
yeah, that's a great one. Oh wow. Well, yeah, I mean, I think I've just been excited about social VR in general. Anytime we have some really great folks come through for events like Reggie Watts or like that comedy thing that was with the Comedy Living Room with Paul Scheer. Like, it just some hilarious people come through that are excited about VR, excited to experiment. So I think that's always exciting to see, to build tools and see what an artist ends up doing with them, and kind of blowing your mind. So that's always exciting. But I think, personal, my dream project, I want to, I'm definitely a big science fiction fan, so I want my own H's Basement from Ready Player One, and get my, exclusive little exclusive club in VR going. And it's like, you just whisper, it'll be like an underground thing once VR is just so huge. It'll be like, whispers like, hey, I'm gonna have it. And it's like, oh man, you need a secret password. You have to do this. You have to do that. I think that'll be kind of a long-term dream. And at some point, we'll have this really convoluted exercise you'll have to go through to find my secret lair and get in my cool club. That'll be that'll be pretty sweet.
I hope I get an invite to at least try and get in.
There we go.
Cool to hang with you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise, good stuff.
Great. Well, I could keep asking questions, but I think should probably sort of stop here.
Sure, it works. No problem. But glad we were able to get it, finally get you in and actually discuss all that good stuff. So, yeah.